As Willie mentioned, we have historian Jon Meacham here with us, and his new biography. I'm so excited about this. His Truth is Marching On, John Lewis and the Power of Hope. It is out today. And, you know, I was thinking about John last night as these events were unfolding. And I was also, watching some of the Republican convention and the hatred. And I just thought about John Lewis and what made him so special. And, this is a guy that I knew, guy that I traveled back and forth from Congress with. He called me, his travel buddy. Every time I was in his presence, John Lewis made me smile. He made people around him smile. He was a joyful spirit, despite the fact, John, that he was a warrior for civil rights.
He was incredible, genuinely incredible. I argue in the book, without embarrassment and with great conviction, that he is a saint in the classical sense of the term. He is sacred and holy and set apart. What is so fascinating is that he is set apart by his virtue and his action, and he walked among us. You two were on, I bet, a lot of Delta flights down to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. And one of the great honors of my life was I met him 28 years ago and was lucky enough to know him through those 3 decades. And every time I was with him, and I am one of an infinite number of folks who can say this, he communicated by his word and deed a sense that we should be better Americans and better Christians. And it wasn't sectarian, and it wasn't preachy, though he started out preaching to the chickens to overcome a stutter back in Troy. As he said, the chickens listened to him more carefully than folks in Congress like you did, Joe, to him. But he embodied the best, not only of what America could be, but what of humanity can be. And we look at what's happening now. One of the reasons I wrote this, honestly, was he was diagnosed, obviously, and left us in July. And I was on the bridge with him, with 1,000 other people in Selma in March. And you realize that this is really an American founding father of the modern America. This country really came into being as we know it in 1965 with the Voting Rights Act, with the Civil Rights Act the year before, with the Immigration Act that shaped the demography of the country. And in that era, there was state-sanctioned totalitarian violence against people because of the color of their skin. And what is happening right as we speak in Wisconsin and elsewhere? There is still this state-sanctioned violence, a disposition, as Jonathan and Gene were talking about, a state-sanctioned bias toward people, toward punishing people because of the color of their skin. And if you're a Christian out there, if you're even a secularly minded person with any inclination to reach out instead of clenching your fist, John Lewis is the place to start.
Jonathan Capehart's with us and has a question. Jonathan.
So, John, we were in Selma together on the bridge with Congressman Lewis in March, and in Birmingham, you gave a stirring and spectacular speech there. But I want to talk about your book, and I learned something over the weekend that I didn't know, and I don't know if you've said this here on Morning Joe, but Congressman Lewis read your book before he passed away, and I would love to know, honestly, what he thought of it.
He was, as ever, incredibly generous. I asked him to write a kind of an afterword for it. It's kind of a last testament, and I want to get that out to folks sometime today. I've had this experience twice where I've been lucky enough to have a subject read something, both with George Herbert Walker Bush and now with John Robert Lewis. And I was as scared as I've ever been. I was more scared of what John Lewis would think than even Barbara Bush would think about writing about her husband. And that's a level of fear that everybody here understands the depths, right? I've still got scars from parts of the Bush book, from Mrs. Bush's knitting needles. But John's reaction was predictably generous, I mean, incredibly kind. And again, I don't mean to be sentimental about it, and this isn't sentimental because it's genuine. Kind words from him kind of suffused your soul with a kind of warmth, right? Because he had done it. And look, what I've done here is de minimis compared to what that young man who with the stutter did the other night at the Democratic Convention, or what the Black Lives Matter activists are doing, or what genuinely courageous people are doing to try to make the arc of a moral universe not just bend, but swerve. And the other thing to remember about Congressman Lewis is he was so young, right? He came to Nashville when he was 17. He went to this small college, American Baptist Theological Seminary. It's up on a hill not far from where I'm sitting. 3 or 4 buildings, overlooks segregated Nashville. They call it the Holy Hill. And one of the things I found, and he was very, I know he knew this, but we did have a lot of conversations about this. He had this amazingly biblical life. All right, you know, he was not John to his family. He was Robert. And he comes to Nashville, he goes to a mountaintop, and he's renamed. He becomes John in the way Abraham and Elijah and Peter were renamed. And there's a biblical theme that runs through his life.
John, when you spoke to Congressman Lewis over the course of this year, and he looked at what was happening around the country, was he hopeful that this time might be different? Did he have reason for optimism?
He was hopeful despite all. And in fact, he and I had this argument for years, which is he believed, unlike Reinhold Niebuhr and unlike a lot of more tragic people with a tragic sensibility, he believed that if we all put our minds and hearts in the right place, if we put them in tune with the gospel, in tune with the moral teachings of all the world religions to love our neighbor as ourselves, that we could in fact bring about the kingdom of God, the beloved community on earth. I don't believe that. I think that we're fallen, frail, and fallible, and it's going to take a cataclysmic event beyond time and space to do that. John Lewis, taught by Jim Lawson, inspired by Dr. King, joined by Diane Nash, believed that that could happen. And at every point, unto the very end, that last trip to Black Lives Matter, I think Jonathan was with him, to the plaza, and into the last conversations we had, he did believe, Caddy, he did believe that if you see something, you say something, and if enough of us say something and do the right thing, we will, in fact, bring about that beloved community. He was always hopeful. And what makes his hope so convincing is that he had the scars to back it up. Because he, as Bernard Lafayette told me, for some reason they always knew to go for John's head. And his friends told me, 3 or 4 of them, that they were surprised he made it through 1965, 66, because he was always on that front line. He never raised a fist in response. He bore witness with his body to the sanctity of human life and to the sanctity of the vote.
The new book is His Truth is Marching On. John Lewis and the Power of Hope, John Meacham's book, out today. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.